John Grayson, hello.
Howdy. Good to see you.
Good to see you
I just
too.
saw you, but
Yeah, right.
good to see you again.
We were just hanging out, yeah, and very fun. I know this is an off week usually for us. We would be last week, but we were traveling to actually be in the same place together at a conference. So here we are together again, and looking forward, as always, to this hour that we get to spend with each other. So,
Right.
For those of you who are new to us, I'm Patrick McGrath. I'm the Chief Clinical Officer at NoCD. NoCD is an online platform for the treatment of OCD and related conditions. We do evidence-based treatments for those, and we do take insurance throughout the U.S., and we also work in Canada and the U.K. and Australia as well. And if you're looking for help with OCD-related conditions, go to nocd.com and you can set up a 15-minute call with one of our team members. It's free, and we'll see what we can do to get you set up. And then joined by the illustrious John Grayson. Hello, John.
Howdy. Am I supposed to introduce myself?
If you feel like it. I mean, otherwise you'll just be John Grayson. That's it.
I'll be John Grayson.
Okay, John Grayson. All right. Well, as always, John and I go through the scroll. I usually kind of start going down. John likes to jump around, which is great. And we'll throw some questions and answers out there and see where we're at. So Prose starts us off with, how much false arousal feels real in sexual orientation OCD? Can sexual orientation OCD cause false arousal in feelings? Well, as we know, anytime any question goes, could OCD do blank? The answer is always, of course. Why wouldn't it do something of that nature? I mean, that's always the thing that I see. And I know, John, we've discussed this before, but these questions come up almost every time we do this. Hey, is it possible that OCD can do this? Yes.
It's kind of a sneaky question. I mean, he's not trying to be sneaky.
Of course.
Because arousal is arousal.
Sure.
And of course, the implication here is really what he means is how much is the source of arousal my concern? That is, am I really gay, or am I having sexual responding at some level for some other reason? And so the good or bad news is, if I focus on my genitals and stuff, or focus thinking about sex, I'm probably going to have arousal.
Yeah.
And so the only good thing I can tell you is it doesn't tell us either way.
Right.
So, and I know this will be just so odd to hear from me. So it's like, yes, you can't use that. The way to treat it is, here's what I currently think I like, and am I this other thing? Maybe, but right now I don't have an overt plan to go off to whatever it is I'm afraid of. So I'll wait till that becomes true, where I don't have any doubt. But arousal is not going to be the measure. It doesn't tell us anything.
Right.
So some women will, during a rape, lubricate, and that is not because they're enjoying it. The body just does that. I mean, it's certainly a horrifying part of the experience, knowing my body's responding against my will, but it's got nothing to do with like secretly liking it or anything. So it doesn't tell you anything.
And we also know that hoping not to think of something will also lead you to think of something as well, too.
Yes. So
Valentina says, what would ERP look like for someone whose OCD is focused on the illness that might only show up 20 years after the exposure, like asbestos? I'll tell you what, I lived that one. When I was in high school, we had these foam kind of ceilings. They had the white paint and the speckles on them, and we'd get the drumsticks out, because I was in band, and we'd carve our name in the ceiling, and all the little dust would fall upon us. And I would joke, one day we're going to find out this is asbestos. It was. I have come to find out it absolutely was. Yeah. So,
but it's a one. I mean, it's a nice, simple question, actually. It's one we can answer straightforward, which is, exposure to something like that. I mean, it requires that you decide, first of all, that you would like to learn to live with possibly having cancer 20 years from now, because that might happen from asbestos or anything, right. So it's not a definite. And so the goal is, well, if you even, in fact, if you knew you were going to have cancer 20 years from now, for sure, the goal would be, well, how do you want to learn to live during those 20 years?
Yeah.
How do you want to make the best of that fact? And once you get the cancer, because it may or may not kill you, how do you want to live your remaining time? So coping is actually, yeah, I hope I don't get it, but if I do, how do I want to live with it? As opposed to, no, this can't happen. I don't want it to happen. I'm afraid. What do I do? What do I do? It's like, well, fact is that, if you get diagnosed with a non-asbestos related cancer tomorrow, I think that would suck. But if you're going to cope with it in a healthy way, you're going to plan like, well, how am I going to cope? Because it's not going to be, you're not going to just be in the state of like, what do I do? What do I do? You're going to like do what doctors tell you. So imagine coping and being miserable, like you could be miserable. So you imagine how I'll cope with it then. And in the meantime, you treat it like a car crash. That is, you might be maimed and paralyzed tomorrow in a car crash, but your current plan, if this isn't your form of OCD, is, well, I hope it doesn't happen, and I'm not going to deal with it till I'm bleeding out, crushed under the metal. So yeah, it might happen. I hope I cope with it. Here's what dying from that would look like, and here's how I would try to make the best of it. And meanwhile, I make the best of living right now, because it would really kind of suck if I spend 20 years being miserable and then I don't get the cancer from asbestos. Would that really suck?
I love to say you could live the rest of your life sitting next to your tombstone wondering when you'll be 20 feet or 6 feet under it, or you could just spend the rest of your life living your life and then eventually be 6 feet under it. Either way, we're going to end up there. You just have to decide, what do you want to do in the meantime in between. And I agree with you, John. I'd like to enjoy my life and do as much as I possibly can, instead of spend my entire life worrying about what it's going to be like once I get there. Now, OCD might be sly and say, yeah, but if you figure it out, then you could do something about it, right? And all these kinds of things. But John and I can tell you from, almost 70 years combined of OCD treatment, that we've never met anyone who's figured it out.
Yeah, because if you have a cure for the cancer, I don't know why you're worried.
Right, exactly. So you could get it. You could not. It is a possibility. It's a possibility for me as well too, due to all of the asbestos that I know that I have ingested throughout my entire life, especially for those years being in band. And I'm sure there's a bunch of it sitting at the bottom of my lungs as we talk right now. So who
To
knows
say
what's
nothing, to say nothing of the zillion of other pollutants and
Yes.
things, and in the water and the microplastics, and just the random ways you might die. So
Yeah.
in life, no one ever survives in the end,
Right.
probably. So, right, I have to make some peace with, this might be one of the ways I'm going to die. It might be second best, but I don't have a choice.
When Susan was going through some of her treatments, there was this one treatment called Lutathera, and she had to have a Geiger counter reading of her body done before they allowed her to leave the hospital. And then I could drive her home, but after I got her home, I couldn't be within 3 feet of her for 7 days because of the amount of radiation that she was emitting from her body. So even though she passed the Geiger counter, it was still at a very high level, and,
Mm-hmm.
and so I had to give her only food on paper plates and plastic forks. She had her own garbage can with double bagged. When she went to the bathroom, she had to flush twice because they didn't want radiation sitting in the pipes in the house and everything. Yeah, it's amazing that even this thing that can cause problems can also be something that we use to try to cure problems as well too.
Amazing, yeah, and horrible, yeah,
And horrible. Yes, it
yeah.
was all. It
We're,
was
we're, get-
all.
we're we're getting great questions. Well, I don't. We're getting questions that are really wonderful, because I feel like my answers are more direct
Okay.
because of the
Mhm.
questions. Because Giro, how long should exposures be? And it seems to be like he feels there's a certain point we cut him off. And I find that I'm always trying to find a way to make an exposure inescapable. I mean, I think one of the reason when we talk about contamination, in some sense, is easier to treat is because I can make an inescapable exposure. I would never have somebody with a contamination like if this is the dirty object, like okay, touch it and that's it. That's a sucky exposure. The
Exactly.
exposure is always I want this rubbed everywhere. Maybe I
Mhm.
should use my shoe because that's like better. I want it
You always,
rubbed
yeah.
everywhere.
Mhm.
And I want to spread it all over the house. And in fact, I have people fill a spray bottle with contaminants because it's really cool, right? We can just spray and everything is just covered with a mist of contamination. And so treating contamination works really well because we make it so inescapable. Your choice is you can take a shower and stand naked or spend 48 hours trying to decontaminate the house. And few people have that level of energy. Where some other exposures, it's hard to make them, ever present, like, by a hit and run. So, so um, he's right. He doesn't have the option. Oh, wait, he doesn't. With body fluid, he doesn't have the option to make them as long. I don't know why not? Can't we spread the fluids everywhere?
Yeah.
Or do what unless this wouldn't work for you, because I do want it everywhere. Uh, get the fluids into a spray bottle. I like the quart size that you can get in, Lowe's or anything, and get it into that and just go over your house and spray it everywhere, including the inside of the dryer, so that everything you run through is going to get contaminated. But go in a room, open up every drawer, every closet, spray everywhere. There is nothing that should not be contaminated. So, because it looks like you wanted to make it longer, so I think making it longer is easy. Hopefully,
Yeah, and the other thing, maybe it could be something as simple as, all right, if you're at home and you go pee, you don't wash your hands afterwards, right? And you just allow that to be that way for the day, and you deal with the discomfort of that. That might be where you start something,
yeah.
right? And
I
just
would put a drop of pee in the water in the spray bottle.
you would, okay.
Yeah, yeah. I
Mhm.
mean, they've got to be willing. I mean, I love it when we have little kids. Um, I often have them get water pistols, and we put a drop of pee in the pistol, and they get to shoot it all around the house, including at their parents, and that gives them some nice, evil joy because kids like being kind of bad.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I think in that case you can make it fun even.
Yeah. So the other thing I've even done is, let's say you think the rag after taking a shower is contaminated because it's rubbed your body, and your body was fluids like sweat were even on there. So you could take that rag and you could touch it to things around the house as well too. Even if you come home after playing basketball, or go for a run, you could take your sweaty shirt and touch it to various things around the home, if that's something that you think is difficult to, and utilize that. So there's lots of ways, obviously, to make these types of things work and to last for quite a while, which is good. So.
Okay.
ABF says, what would be an appropriate exposure for sexual orientation OCD when the sufferer's OCD fear is that he doesn't love his family? Is it just living with the uncertainty of not knowing? I mean, that's kind of the crux of the situation is OCD tells you that you have to know things to a level that is beyond the level that anybody else has to know anything. Uh, John, I'm assuming you know that you love your wife, but you wouldn't know it enough to
You
satisfy
know,
OCD.
it's interesting when you say that.
Hmm.
What I would say, because I'm a pain in the ass,
You
is
are. That's okay. Hmm.
I feel like I love my wife. And so I kind of, in myself, I kind of believe it, but do I actually know? And, I'd have to admit that just because I believe it doesn't make it so. People believe a lot of things. Some people, but doesn't make it so. However, having been married to her for over 50 years, and it certainly looks like a good relationship, like we're not killing each other. We enjoy our time together. I have no reason to um to have to figure it out beyond that. Like, this is working well. I feel like I love her. I don't have to question it, as opposed to,
Right.
like something is really seriously wrong and it's really miserable. Is it great every moment? And is every moment orgasmic bliss? And
No. Mhm.
wait, no, I was going to say yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're lucky
No,
then. Very lucky.
yeah, but I mean, I was thinking, Kathy and I took a vacation in Paris a couple of years ago. And, when you say you're a couple and you went to Paris, everybody's eyes like glaze over because that's so romantic. And it was a fantastic vacation. Every morning we went to this patisserie where we'd have, coffee and a croissant. But let's face it, it is just a piece of pastry. And we only went to this one place, and the cafe au lait was incredible there, but we only went there 2 days. The other days we went to some other place where it wasn't as good, but it wasn't like, oh my God, why didn't we go to that other place? It was still nice. And we went to the catacombs there. Do you know about the catacombs in
Mhm.
Paris?
Mhm.
Right. Weird place, miles of underground tunnel. You get to walk through about a half a mile or a mile of them, which filled with the bones of 6 million people. Where the wall there are these little side things where the wall is made of femurs laid end to end, and behind them just a bunch of bones thrown there. It was really cool. But we waited 3 hours in the hot sun to see it. Now, we made the best of that. We did one day trip where it was like a 3 hour bus ride, and 3 hour bus ride is a 3 hour bus ride. Went to one restaurant that was a fine restaurant, but neither of us are like foodies, so it's not necessarily you're going to like the food, So, but that wasn't really the point. And so the thing is, we did love this vacation, considered it great, but not every moment is like wow, you know. So it's the same as everything else. So if my measure is I have to feel a certain way constantly, well, everything in my life fails.
Yeah.
So say, it's like, well, I seem to like these people, why, and God, if you can define exactly what love is, that's cool. Um, but I assume you'd rather be around them more than not.
Right.
Not on every moment, especially if it's a whole family. Somebody in the family is like, oh, but
Yeah. I want to add one thing to the end there, again, ABF says, is it just living with the uncertainty of not knowing? I would say it is living with the uncertainty of not knowing, again, in a way that OCD will ever feel satisfied, because no one has ever satisfied OCD. So you will always be living, no matter what kind of OCD or subtype or deal or whatever it is, you will always be living in a way of not fully understanding or knowing or gaining a level of certainty that OCD will say is acceptable.
yeah, I would like him to enjoy his family, but not perfectly.
Right.
Yeah, they're decent. They're fun. Sometimes they're a lot of fun, you know, and noticing what I enjoy as opposed to does it feel the way I should.
Yeah. Taylor says, how do you deal with OCD core fear of potentially being falsely convicted of a crime and sent to prison? Every day it feels like walking on eggshells, knowing it could happen. Well, first of all, I'd be very interested to understand the compulsions that you're doing throughout the day, Taylor. Are you searching the internet to see if there might have been something that is leading the police or the FBI toward you? Are you checking out peepholes and looking out the window to see if the police are showing up or SWAT teams are gathering down the block or anything of that nature? I'd love to understand all the various compulsions that are happening that are really kind of maintaining this probably very intrusive behavior and feeling throughout your day. That would be interesting to understand for sure.
Especially because as you're pointing out that this could happen, and the wonderful thing about your rituals, they're not going to prevent it.
Right.
Like they're not going to prevent it if they and it's really unlikely you're going to be able to find the evidence it's about to happen. The police are coming, they're just knocking on your door. And then I go to what I always go to is like, well, I we agree it would suck if it happened, but what would you do? Because like, yes, you'd be miserable, but is your life going to be over? And it depends on the crime and how long you're sent to prison. But even though I would hate going to be prison, I'd be really miserable. And I feel like depending on the crime and the false evidence, I think some people would have faith in me. A bunch would not like me, but in the end, whether I'm in prison for a month or 10 years, the only thing I can do is how do I make the best of that? Do I want to go to prison for 10 years? Absolutely not. But if I'm stuck with it, well, I'd like to make the best of it while I'm miserable. I hope it's a federal crime. I used to work with drug addicts on probation and parole, and federal prisons are a lot like nicer and safer than state prisons because it's a higher level of crime. But that's true. But all I can do is make the best of it. So yes, and there's no way you can avoid it. And I'm not sure which you'd prefer. I'm not sure if you'd prefer being falsely sent to prison, convicted falsely of a crime, where, there is always the hope eventually they'll figure out it's wrong. Or would you rather be in a car accident where you end up being a quadriplegic, deaf and blind and laying on a bed for 20 years? Because you know what? Statistically, that's more likely. Mm-hmm. And so you could say, well, you know what? That's it. That's true. I'm not driving anymore. And, but that doesn't, I always like to think it's a good idea to not walk in the middle of the highway, but just because I walk on the sidewalk doesn't mean a car is not going to jump the sidewalk and hit me. So I think there are a lot of things that are more likely than your fear, and horribly or not horribly, or just because it's life, you don't have a choice about them either. And I really kind of think I prefer prison to being a head on the bed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, we're getting to a similar theme, and John and I love to find themes in these things. But you're going to want. Well, let me change that. Your OCD is going to want absolute proof that you have not done anything worthy of going to jail.
Oh, wait. Just to correct you, she's falsely convicted. She didn't do anything. She's one of those they pick, you look like this person and we think you did this, and and the evidence just throws her into prison for something minor or major.
So then if it doesn't even depend on anything you've done, there's absolutely no rituals to undo anything you've done. So now you just have to figure out, is there a magical ritual that you can do that prevents people from falsely accusing you of something, is what it would be.
And it reminds me of
I haven't found one.
It reminds me of a scrupulosity issue, which is,
yeah, it is almost.
Well, but imagine that you're going to hell when you die. So, this is pretty awful. I mean, I'm not going to be happy. But let's say also that you're going to live another 50 years. Well, I really want to enjoy those 50 years, because after that, it's going to suck.
Right. Exactly.
And it's like, or do I want to be miserable for 50 years, which seems like a waste.
Again, you're going to live next to your tombstone and wonder when you're going to be under it, or you're going to enjoy your life. Mm-hmm. OCD does not care if you enjoy your life or not, because OCD only cares about you feeding it compulsions. So your enjoyment of your own life is secondary to the needs of obsessive compulsive disorder. My brother was having really bad allergies, so I decided to give him a Benadryl. After he took it, I then found out it was expired. I'm worried he will get sick. Is this my fault? What's good ERP?
He's making me want to start with the reasonable answer, which I kind of hate doing.
Right.
So here's the thing. How often has he read of people dying or getting sick or anything from drugs that are expired? Because, if a drug is going to be poisonous at expiration, these things would be pulled from the market. The idea that's like, it's a 2-year-old drug and now I can get horribly sick and maybe die. That's not going to be on the market. And, they're not, and you don't read about that. So I hate to be reassuring, but I mean, generally an expired drug has not become poisonous. It at most has become ineffective. However, in life, we might make mistakes for which we feel guilty, and we have to, and we may have to learn to forgive ourselves, that it was not my intention, this horrible thing. So I'll never feel good about it. And forgiving myself just means I'm acknowledging, like, I wasn't paying attention, or this thing happened by accident. And, yeah, I feel horrible about the outcome, and it may torture me forever in some sense. But I also acknowledge that, like, I can't watch every second. I remember when my son was about 2 and he was playing on this wagon that I was pulling around real fast, and he like swung out and slammed onto the ground. I felt really bad. I mean, luckily he wasn't damaged, but I felt really bad for the little guy. Um, and it was my fault. I mean, it kind of like I wasn't doing anything really weird, but it was my fault. So I can feel bad about something, and forgiving myself is, I know I'm going to live a life where I'll make mistakes, so I may not like what happened. I mean, you know what? If I'm driving a car and a kid runs out and I run over the kid, and it's not even technically my fault, I don't think that, I mean, that's nice to know. I'm never going to feel good about that, though. I'm going to live with it. I will forgive myself, but I'm always going to hate that I killed a kid or I maimed a kid. It doesn't even matter that it's my fault or not. So learning to forgive myself, which is like, I can't be perfect. Patrick can be perfect, but I can't do that.
Yeah. No, I failed. I tried, but it didn't work. So, um, it, is it my fault? In again, and in the world of OCD, there's always a possibility, and OCD loves a possibility. So, and in fact, I often use the phrase in OCD: possibility equals probability, meaning that if I've found a possibility, it's created 100% probability that it's going to happen and that it's true and that it's probably my fault and that I'm bad and all those types of things. So, James, when you're asking about treatment and ERP there, it's accepting the uncertainty, living with the doubt, recognizing that you are not to go back and keep checking on your brother to see, is he feeling okay? Does he have any weird symptoms or those types of things? But just allowing for the fact that just because OCD is telling you what if he has those and what if this and what if that, that you can accept the fact that, okay, there, those things may happen.
And I guess, and I said, and in the larger picture, it doesn't matter that it might be your fault, because there will be things in your life that will be your fault. And we still have to cope with those
Mhm.
there will be things that will happen. And, finding a way to move on, even though I may have a really awful time with it always in some respect.
Yeah. Edgar says, why is my sexual orientation trying to convince me I'm gay? Every day I'm assaulted by triggers. Then my OCD says, see, that's evidence you're gay. How can I overcome this? What's good ERP for this?
So the
I,
first part's easy.
yeah, go ahead.
It tries to convince you you're gay because you're terrified you're gay.
Yeah,
It picks something that's a threat to you. Now, that in no way tells you whether or not you're gay.
right.
So, all and all any of us get to know is, today, as far as I know, I don't have a plan to start sleeping with men. Um, that's it. You know, do I want to? I don't think I want to, but do I really want to? I can never establish that. So all I can do is, here's my current plan. And if I wake up tomorrow and I suddenly want to sleep with men, then I'm gonna have to decide what I want to do. Like, if I wake up, I don't want to wake up gay tomorrow, but I might wake up gay tomorrow. Who knows? My niece, who's gay, she had a partner for 20 years. And in the course of 1 week, her partner left her for a guy. Like, out of the blue, she just suddenly became straight. Um, like, how to explain that? My niece was so pissed off. Um, and so, it may be a low probability event, but what do? We move on. So if I wake up gay tomorrow, like, I have choices. It's like, well, I still love my wife, and so I still have a great time with her. So, maybe I'll settle for what'll be second best. Because let's say, in any relationship, there's some ways we do that because, if you are 25 and then, you're married, well, 40, 50 years later, your partner's not going to look like a 25-year-old. I mean, my wife does, but, you know, but right. I mean, they look older, but it's not like, okay, I can, she has to look the same and I don't look the same. So, okay, so maybe I'll stay with her, even though I, think men would be cooler to be with. Um, or, um, or do I leave her, because I really have to have a gay relationship, or, what are the situations? So even if I'm gay, it doesn't determine what I'll do. I still have another decision to make. Um, but all I get to know is I don't get to know that I'm straight right now. I just get to know I think I'm straight. And I know that I don't have a conscious plan to sleep with anyone. Well, anyone else actually, male or female. But
I'm thinking you're not sleeping with anyone else. Yeah, probably. But
yeah.
yeah.
But that's all I get. I get to know for now. We'll see about tomorrow.
Right. Mhm. Gil says, I'm having bad harm thoughts. So there's a problem right there, but we'll get to that. I'm having bad harm thoughts that seem that I want to do awful things when I don't. That makes me worry I have schizophrenia and I'm going to lose control. How do I cope? So the first thing that I always jump on is this notion of bad harm. There's no such thing as a bad harm thought. Otherwise, people who write horror films would be horribly awful people because all they do is dream up ways to harm people for films and then sell the manuscripts for millions of dollars. So
Which
are
means
they
that
bad?
everybody wants to see those harming films.
Yes,
Yeah.
right.
Unless they're a good harm thought. I'm not sure what a good harm thought would be.
Well, I'm sure that there are people who think, well, this horrible dictator ought to die, and maybe they think that's a good harm thought or something of that nature. But other people who love that dictator would say it's a terrible thought. So even that is subjective in that
Yeah.
type of situation. So let's first remove this notion of a good thought or a bad thought or anything like that right off the bat. I mean, I just
And along those lines, like, and it's getting to be an old show. Oh gosh, I'm blocking on the vampire show. It was on HBO.
uh, um,
They were both
when
old
you
again.
went in, the air went out. Don't know anything. I'm gonna
Anyway,
smoke. Yeah,
anyway, but there were good
I know.
vampires and
True blood,
bad
true blood,
vampires.
true blood, true blood,
True Blood,
true blood.
yes. There were
Mhm.
good vampires and bad vampires, and the heroine is in love with a good vampire. And because it's
Yeah,
HBO, they have to have explicit sex every show. And part of their sex is at some point during sex, he chomps down her neck, blood comes pouring out. Except in this show, that's a good thing. And the show is incredibly popular, and everybody loves that. So I don't know that your thoughts are more weird than that. We consider that normal. That was like exciting. And it's like, okay, blood biting people and blood, and so right. So yes, you're very creative, and one hopes you don't do this. It won't do it. But everybody thinks about these harm things. Now, I can give you some assurance. Um, if you're gonna, the disorder you're afraid of, schizophrenia, is not the correct disorder. Because in schizophrenia, you're going to be hallucinating. You would kind of not know you have it, but basically, schizophrenia, you're going to see the three-headed dog come out of the wall and you know it's there. So, this idea of getting violently out of control from going crazy could happen, but low probability. How do we cope? And we've talked about this. Like, how do I, luckily for you, having OCD does not put you at greater risk to do these things than me. Maybe that's not comforting. And having these particular thoughts doesn't put you at greater risk. So I might slice and dice Kathy tonight. I don't know. And the thing is, um, I'll bet you don't do this because I always have a knife with me. I mean, I have that knife,
I
and
do at home. Yeah,
yeah, you have that knife, but I also have this knife, and
nice
I
one.
have this knife,
Lovely. Hmm.
and this one,
Oh, that's a
and
good one.
this one,
Fun.
and this one.
Fun.
Anyway, I have a few. So anyway, I hope I don't slice and dice her tonight. And if I do, and I'm dead serious about saying this, in the morning, one of two things happens. I come back to my senses and I'm horrified. I'm going to have to go to prison because, like we don't know what it was. I will feel bad about it. But sooner or later, I'm going to have to forgive myself. Not that it feels good, but I'm going to have to forgive myself because I wasn't me. I was in some other weird state. So I'm gonna have to make the best life I can in prison, unless I don't come back to my senses and I'm still bonkers the next morning. In which case, I'm putting my knives away. In which case, it's good to take care of them and keep them sharp. In which
Right.
case, my goal in the morning now is to escape because I don't want to go to prison and try to elude capture. And if they capture me, then the goal is I go to prison and I try to make a good life for myself. But still being crazy, I won't have to deal with the guilt. But that's the truth. That's all I can do. So I don't hide the knives clearly, and you know, and I don't worry that she's gonna do it to me. So, and if I have a harm thought, it's like again, the difference between you and Stephen King is he writes the stories and gets rich. And again, everybody thinks like this because that's why he's rich, because everybody watches the stuff he writes. So
Right.
and to make a story good, he has to make it personal. What would it be like if I killed this person I love? Because that's how he makes characters real. So, um, and as Patrick was going to point out in a second, the way to ensure that you think something is to try not to think about it.
Exactly. Exactly. And you're very right too on the idea of people really do bastardize the idea of schizophrenia when they have OCD fears of schizophrenia because OCD fears of schizophrenia are almost always this: I'm going to go do these awful, horrible things, and that's not what people with schizophrenia do.
Right,
Even,
right.
they they hallucinate and they have delusions, but they don't go and do these terrible, awful, horrible things. Uh, if you're in many cities, large cities, you might see somebody with schizophrenia who's homeless, who's at most muttering to themselves and maybe hoarding a grocery cart full of stuff, but it's not like they're just going around and being violent all day
Yeah,
to
I
people.
don't, or to
So
put it in statistical terms, and I mean, I don't know the stats for sure, but I don't know that the rate of murder by schizophrenics is higher than the normal population. Might be lower, but
yeah,
I don't know that it's higher. So, um, so you might be a killer just because you don't have schizophrenia.
yeah, right. Um, Please share some ERP tips for sensory motor theme OCD, whereby breathing in a certain way or waiting for some sensory natural activity like yawning before starting any work. It's like this OCD is asking me to wait for that natural activity to complete before moving on to the next task. Please help. Well, the simple answer, of course, do the task when you don't feel well and allow yourself to learn that you can handle that experience because OCD is a liar. And if it says to you, oh, you can only do this and will only turn out well if you feel the right way before you do it, that is the area that we are going to attack for exposure and response prevention therapy and have you purposely do things while breathing wrong, yawning in a weird way, or something of that nature. In fact, John, I will do the rest of this discussion you and I have with a weird. Hold on. Okay, you had a. Yeah, there we go. Now, John and I have both
Yeah.
done a weird breathing thing, and we are going to keep on going here, even though that didn't feel quite right to us, and we're not going to have the right sensory feeling going on.
However,
However,
I will give Rosie that it may even be that you will not perform as well because currently you're in the habit of obsessing and it might be like you're feeling like how can I keep going on because I did this, and that's okay because part of the getting better is do it, moving forward and not doing it as well initially. Maybe it'll take you a while to you know be able to focus more on work when you're in the wrong state. uh so I urge you to listen to Patrick.
Tamara says, I did a loop tape exercise today for going crazy, and I sat with the anxiety. I said, maybe I will, maybe I won't. My anxiety is worse this evening. Is this expected? Well, sure, if it's where you're starting off. I mean, you're probably just sitting there looking for it and worrying and getting worked up. But you know what? Do it again tomorrow, and then do it again the
Oh,
next
no,
day,
no,
and then
no,
do it again
no,
the next
no,
day.
no, no, no,
What, the
no.
exposure?
You're saying do it again tomorrow.
The ERP work.
Yeah, I don't know why the tape isn't playing constantly.
Oh, I'll give you that. Okay. Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
I'll give you
like it
that.
could be in the
I'll
background
give
while
you that.
she's watching TV. She can
Sure.
be wearing headphones. I mean, she can't maybe do it in certain places like work, but hey, I'd have that going constantly.
I'll give you that. Okay.
You know,
Hmm. Yeah.
okay,
Yeah. Yeah. But keep it going. Hey, John, you might go crazy by the time this is over today, just so you
it's likely.
know. There you go. My Michelle says I have an upcoming trip by plane and keep thinking, what if my plane crashes? I'm saying maybe it will, maybe it won't to the OCD, but any other tips on how to deal with it? Well, first of all, don't know if that's OCD or not. It might be a fear of flying or a phobia or something. Could have an OCD type of thing there. You may be doing compulsions while now to try to prevent the plane from crashing that will get it ready to stay in the air. You may find yourself doing certain things on the plane as well too. Um, as I think John's already thinking in his head, the likelihood is that no matter what you do, you have no control over what happens to that plane once it is in the air. It is under the control of the pilots, and not even the total control of the pilots, because there's always birds, mechanical failure, and various other things that could happen too that are out of the control of any of those folks. And so what do we do? Just like as John said earlier, driving or anything else, we accept the fact that we live in a world where we don't have an absolute guarantee that anything's going to go right or wrong, and we live our lives.
And this
And that's
gives her a great opportunity to practice mindfulness. Now, when I say mindfulness, I don't mean like, oh, you'll do this wonderful Zen activity and you'll feel good. Mindfulness is doing two things at once. So if your issue is, but I don't want to be like scared and terrified the whole plane ride, well, I think you're going to be scared much of the plane ride. I'm not trying to get you not
yep.
scared, but you know what? It would not make sense to just be scared the whole time. I would like you to do two things. Like, being scared because you can't avoid it, and then watching a movie or reading. Watching movies probably easier. I'd have you doing something else where I expect you will not enjoy it as much as you would if you weren't scared. But I do want you to notice whatever part of the movie you're enjoying, because that's the beginning of learning how to do that. And, people always say, let the feeling be there. I think that's kind of crap, because it's not like you have a choice. So it might
It's
be
going to
really
be
there,
there.
really
Yeah.
nervous, and I'm really working hard to try to watch the movie. And success doesn't mean like I watched the movie and didn't think about it. It's like I got some enjoyment out of the movie. I'm getting treatment, so I'm getting some enjoyment. And the ideal, I wish we could have you flying all over the world watching movies until it gets, to it's like, all right, I can feel crappy and watch movies. But for now, that's the beginning step.
Yeah. John, this next one is up your alley. I'm excited to read this to you. Is there any helpful advice you have for those of us with mental compulsions who want the thought to stop, to replace the thought, or to think of something better? I feel like I don't have thoughts that are me anymore.
Thank you. You're right. One thing I love, and I'm going to start in the back, because, Elena says she doesn't, she doesn't have thoughts that, feel like me anymore. And, I do feel like me. But you know what? You can't get anybody to explain to you what it feels like for them to be themselves. Like, what makes you you? Well, what if you're not a psychologist? Are you still you? Like, whatever you take, like, how do I know I'm me? And if you really question people, at some point they will go, I just know. Now, I just know is code for shut up. I can't explain it. I just feel it. So leave me alone. So most people accept that. Now, so I don't, there's no way I can stop, replace, or think of something better. I can also think of other stuff. And of course, so I don't, I can't, I may have something going in the back of my mind, but I don't have to, I can learn to not make it my primary attention. Again, not my primary attention isn't like, oh, I think about something else and it's not really there. I'm doing both at once. Um, and that is kind of what we're learning to do. So yes, I can have them going there and it's making all this noise and it's trying to tell me what to do and my mind's almost compulsing, but I'm learning to pay attention to this other activity, not to replace it, but because I'd really rather do that. And so let me do this one, you know um partially, and I will get better at doing that. And it is also critical that my goal, and this is hard, I can wish the thoughts stop, that's fine, but I have to also decide I want to learn to live with them, because I'm never stopping them, I'm never replacing them. I can think of things that are better along with them, but as long as the goal is they have to stop, they will never stop. And if the goal is I want to learn to live with them, I'll stop noticing them. And just to aggravate everybody and to join once again with Patrick, we both have tinnitus that we are fine, that's there. I didn't notice my tinnitus until I read this question. Like it's there because now I hear it, but like I wasn't noticing it at all. And until I mentioned Patrick got to be free of it probably. But
Now it's there, though. Thank you.
yeah,
Yeah.
but both of us don't actually care. So it's not like, oh, I can't believe you did that. So I want to get to be that way with thoughts. That takes practice. And the key thing is deciding I want to learn to live with it as opposed to get rid of it.
I'm jumping down because someone has
That's
asked,
fine.
isn't reasoning with these thoughts like you guys are with each question, sending a compulsion and keeping yourself inside your head? Well, we're not reasoning with the thoughts. I want to make that very clear to everyone in case that has come across in any way whatsoever. We know that OCD is a terrorist and we do not negotiate with terrorists. So we don't reason with thoughts
We
whatsoever.
we have we have given reasons to decide to live with them, but
Yes,
we have not given anything that says this is just a thought. I would
correct.
never say that because low probability events happen. I mean, it'd be nice to learn to be comfortable with low probability. But to be comfortable with low probability, I kind of have to decide I will live with it even if it happens, because they might happen.
Yeah. So I just wanted to clear that one up before we do anything else. So I'm going to go back. John, were there any that were standing out for you whatsoever? As you
I
were.
know, well, at 5:04, that explains a lot to me. Um, Not about my clock, but like I kept thinking, didn't Patrick have some facial hair?
I shaved. Yes, I did.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The clock is really heavy and it's too hard to take off the wall to put a battery in it. So I've just been leaving it there because
It's
it's
right twice
raw.
a day. So there you go.
It's right twice a day. Yes.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
Um,
Uh, Ashley, I like this one.
oh, you know what? That's so great. I was going to pick Ashley too.
Oh, good. What do you do with regret of years wasted on OCD? Uh, Go forward and live the life that you're allowed to live now that OCD isn't taking it over. That's what I would do. I mean, oh, I will sometimes say to people, this might be one of the last vestiges of OCD on you, trying to pull you back in and get you to come back to, wait a minute, don't forget about me. Hold on, let me. And there's a line in, I'm a big fan of the band Rush. There's a line in one of their songs that says, all that you can do is wish them well. Even if you're going through hell, just keep on going. And people are going to try to goad you and get you. And the best thing to do is say, okay, yeah, thanks. And move on and go live the life that you'd like to live instead of the life that OCD's going to try to pull you back into living.
And what Ashley's doing by mistake, which many people with and without OCD do, is she's cheating, because she's making an assumption that life would have been better without it. And that might be. It's definitely a possibility, but you know what? Maybe without OCD, you would have made some really horrible decisions that would have made your life much worse right now. I always imagine a woman in a really abusive relationship where she's getting the hell beaten out of her every other week or so. And she's finally in treatment. It was a 5-year relationship. And she's like, John, I wish I'd gotten out of this 5 years ago. Cause like, I think like I saw it coming in the first month or so. And I say, no, you don't. I said, well, back then, you know, you would date somebody like that. What makes you think you wouldn't have picked somebody worse? So, and so the life would be different and maybe it would be better. And there was a woman who was in treatment with me who did really well. And one day in our support group, she said, I have no regrets about having had OCD because I like myself. And I feel like if I didn't go through all that stuff, I'd be someone else. I mean, she might be great, but I like me. And I feel like I learned from OCD. I feel like I'm a more empathetic person from OCD. So, I mean, am I glad that I have it under control now? Absolutely. But I want to be me. And to be me, I had to go through all that. So none of you are defective.
Mm-hmm.
This is the longer version of what Patrick says. It's like, okay, there are things I lost, there are things I gained, but if you're going to have a good life, you learn from that stuff. And so, would it have been nice to get it without doing it that way? Sure. But that's someone else's life. And that other person who didn't go through the garbage you went through, she might be happier, but I don't know if you would like her because we don't know what she's like. So it's kind of learning to, where am I going next?
Yeah.
Because when anybody has a regret, like I should have done X, it's always an assumption. Well, that would have been a good life. It would have been different. It doesn't mean it would have been better. It could have been worse. You're artificially picking the one good outcome.
I like this one. Nat says, I've noticed that my relationship OCD thoughts come up when I feel my happiest. Is there a correlation there? Yeah, we're like both of us are like, yep. Nat, I'm going to go back to something we said earlier, and John, I think you'll back me up on this. I wouldn't be surprised, even if it's not very consciously aware on your part, Nat, that when you're feeling happy, you're sure hoping those thoughts don't come back and ruin the happiness.
We had a guy in our support group who had thoughts about his wife having affairs and all kinds of weird sexual things, and they were going to be going out on to a concert, and he was like, and he says to the group, I hope I don't have the thoughts during the concert. So everybody gently laughed at him because it's like, if you're saying you hope to, like this is a guarantee. And actually what we did with him was he had set a timer that every half hour during the concert, he had to take out 5 minutes to think purposely about all the awful things his wife may have done. And he said he had a great concert. I mean, it was getting, like initially it was a little bit thing, and then it was just kind of a pain in the neck to keep doing it. But he stopped trying to not have the thoughts, and he didn't worry about having the thoughts during the 25 minutes because he knows he's going to have, he knows they're coming. So it didn't matter if they're there, they're coming. So it wasn't to get rid of the thoughts, it was to live with them. But yes, exactly what Patrick said. You know, there's probably like, oh my gosh, is OCD going to ruin my life always? And it's like, that's why we want to learn to invite it in and live with the scariest things.
Yeah. Uh, the paradox of the mind has always been interesting to me in these types of situations, and I've always loved those conversations with people where there seems to be this lie. I mean, OCD loves a lie, of course, but there seems to be a very convincing lie told by OCD that if you wanted to, you could actually never think of something ever again. If you could just figure out how to do that, that would be a possibility. Now, John, I don't know that you've ever met anyone who's been able to do that without a brain injury or brain surgery, because wiping out a part of the brain definitely can remove a memory. I mean, we would agree on that, right? But otherwise, I don't know that we've ever met anyone that has been able to actually fulfill that thing that OCD has said is a possibility. So
I agree, and I just want to address something in general that I'm seeing there. Somebody who's wishing that they wouldn't have to take meds. They'd like to do mind over matter, and I always say acceptance sucks. OCD is a learned and biological disorder, and meds alone, without ERP tend to lead to some improvement, but combined with ERP lead to a lot of improvement. So for a lot of people, I'm sorry, going off meds does not make sense. I've had people go off meds, and it's like they discover, wow, I needed this. I also see the sad thing where somebody said I was doing great and the last 2 years are horrible. And I went off meds 2 years ago. And it's like, oh, wait a second. Can we deal with that first? So, I, you know, it is a real biological disorder as well as a learned disorder. So you're stuck with Patrick and I. That's a nightmare you'll have to accept. But you may also be stuck with meds. And in general, I always kind of discourage people talking about meds on a list because the effect of meds on me can be completely different for you from you. On the average, we have a bunch of meds that on the average are great for everybody individually. This one worked for me, but another one will work for somebody else. So it's a little bit of a crapshoot and experimenting. So yep, a lot of people will need meds, and the idea of like if I was strong enough, I could do it
oh yeah,
is not true. It's
yeah,
not true, and it's
that's
it's
a good
it's
one.
and,
Mhm.
I'm just keep talking because I don't know how to stop. Um, when I was younger, when I would get cavities, I was afraid of getting Novocaine, so I would get my teeth drilled without anything,
Oof.
and I'd be gripping. And this one cavity, the guy said to me like, "You got to do it." So I do it, and afterwards I thought, "Holy crap, was I an idiot?"
Yeah,
And I've had many people I've worked with OCD who were resistant to meds. And when they finally went on, it's like, okay, was I an idiot?
yeah,
Wow. Now that's combined with treatment. Meds alone, 25 to 50%, which is great, but not, for a lot of people, that's still pretty sick. Combined with exposure, when they're trying to do the right thing, then lowering that affecting biology can be very powerful.
yeah. I'm going to jump to the end and for our last question tonight. Is a compulsion always fear driven? No, because even though the DSM lists OCD as distress or anxiety, which you would automatically kind of think fear, it misses out on a lot of other pieces that OCD uses to drive people to do compulsions, like shame or guilt or disgust as well. So compulsions are done to neutralize something that is very uncomfortable in your head. Whatever emotion or feeling that might be, with the belief that you can get some relief from that, or that it will somehow prevent something bad from happening or something like that. But it does not have to be fear driven. And John and I have treated thousands of people who are driven by shame and disgust
Yes.
and guilt.
There's a consequence that's trying to be avoided, and frequently it's fear, but I'm trying to avoid a consequence. And, you know, it's really critical that a therapist figures out what is you're trying to avoid and what it is you have to live with. And if that's the person I think it is, hi, Janine. Um, so
All
we've
right.
used up another hour. Wow.
We have. Well, John Grayson, as always, thank you for joining. And thank all of you for being here with us. My name is Patrick McGrath, once again, Chief Clinical Officer at NoCD, and happy you are all here with us. If you're looking for help for OCD, check us out at nocd.com. And we work with people in the US, Canada, the United Kingdom, and Australia as well, too. Be back again next week, and John will be back in 3 weeks because we're off of our schedule a little bit, so it'll be 3 instead of our usual 4. And John, as always, thanks for joining tonight. I appreciate it.
Pleasure as always. Take care. And hi, Janine. Glad to know it's you.